Hi, this is Mike making my video to add to my collection. Today is Friday the 25th, 2025 of April. So anyway, it's 4:25 a.m. So yeah, I'm just making a video trying to highlight, basically uh, what it is, that the phenomenon is, basically being awake, waking up from your sleep, basically. Uh, basically this is a state of being that, that we have. And there's really two states, the spiritual and the physical. Uh, so anyhow, between the two of them, you have, you have your waking state, and then you have like the other state that's above that, basically. And that's, when you're using 100% of your mind, uh, and, basically, and, your mind is fully active, and you're fully awake at 100% capacity. And, that state of being, you can control the space-time universe. And there's procedures that are involved, that, pretty much enable you to be that way. But it's like having a dream, and you get one out of 1,000, that's so lucid that you can't tell the difference between that and reality. And there's a world on the inside of your head, and there's a world on the outside. So when you shut off your mind, or you shut off your reptilian mind, your brain, your reptilian brain, um, basically what you're doing is you're stopping all the inputs from your body. And, likewise, when you do that, uh, you're putting your body into paralysis. And then what happens is your mind takes over. Well, it's not so much that you're putting your body in paralysis. I mean, there's that tree frog or whatever venom that does that. And when your body is, when you're not getting the inputs of your mind, your reptilian mind, brain, your DOS operating system, and when that shuts off, and then what happens is your executive functions, and your emotional, your heart-mind connection actually take over when they work together. So, this is a theory, of course. I think your creative side of your mind is in charge of the supernatural stuff, and your executive side, has to do with your ego. And of course, when you annihilate your ego, then the servant, the slave, takes over, and the master steps down. And when the servant takes over, what happens is, the helper, the Holy Spirit, basically Sophia, and she takes over. And then when that happens, you have an overwhelming sense of peace. But then along with that, you have supernatural things, and you see colors, like colors that you normally wouldn't see. Uh, it's almost like every day is like beautiful Easter pastel colors and everything like that. Even the lights have hues that that you normally don't see, and you see beautiful colors all the time. And you have an overwhelming sense of love, and you care about people, you care about humanity, and you know, basically, you're in love with the world and you're in love with people. You don't have hate, you don't have malice in your heart. So, anyway, with that being said, you know, that's kind of like that aspect of your mind, you know, is dormant. But they show MRIs, you know, with people that uh, are serial killers and sociopaths and whatnot. And then what they do is they show that, and you can actually see there's parts of your mind that are inactive. And likewise, you know, they show people that are in a state of flow and they're feeling this peace and this warmth and splendor and all that. And then when they show that, then they show that other aspects of their mind are being enacted and being used. And these aren't small parts of your mind; they're actually pretty large. And so anyway, it's kind of like when the two minds become one. It can show that on an MRI, and it actually shows that your mind is very active, and larger parts of it are being used. So, but anyway, that's really what it is. You know, there's the amygdala, I think, is like a hair trigger, and it turns on or turns off. You know, it's a very sensitive part of your brain, and I think what it is when you have no fear, and you know, basically, and the amygdala is off, I believe. So then that way, what that does is it shuts off the parts of your brain that are always worried about, uh, you know, self-preservation and stuff like that. And it gives the illusion that, I mean, it's almost like a setup where your brain your body tells your brain that your reptilian mind tells your executive mind that you've died, and it's almost the same effect. And then what happens is, you know, then you have all these supernatural experiences. And all I can say to that is that it's an illusion. Heaven and earth will pass away, and you know, meaning that what governs the body and what governs the mind. So, you know, when you have this delusion, you know, this powerful delusion that your mind gives you, it's really ultimately just an illusion. I mean, you play video games and it's very similar as far as the reality that we live in. And it's also begs the question, you know, if a tree falls in the woods in Siberia and nobody was around to see it fall or hear it fall, did it even fall or did it make a sound? And, you know, really, if you think about it, that's in essence, you know, the same as reality. If you don't observe it, it doesn't exist, which leads to the whole idea that everything is inside your mind. All reality is. And, you know, nothing exists outside the simulation. And a lot of scientists are looking the wrong direction. They're looking outside of the human mind. They examine the heavens, they examine the earth, you know, but they don't know the people, or let's say they don't know who's in their presence. They don't do enough as far as examining the mind, and they're always looking at the stars and they're looking at in the ocean and this and that, but they need to basically start focusing on what's on the inside of the human mind. So, you know, with that being said, you know, there is nothing outside the simulation, and you know, I've seen time and time again, you know, examples where reality basically ceases to exist once you don't observe it. Once you shut the lights off in the room and you fall asleep, you know, basically everything outside of you is non-existent until you wake up. So that's really what it is. And then, of course, you know, like I said, you know, DMT and this and that. psychoactive drugs, you know, they numb parts of your body or your mind, so that way when you're comfortably numb like that, and then it it doesn't have that biofeedback loop that tells your brain that you're alive, and then basically your brain is tricked into the thought that you're dead or your body's no longer in existence. And the same thing happens when you fall asleep. You know, you have chemicals that paralyze your body, and then you're dedicating all that energy of your heart, your lungs, and all that basically, you know, to your autonomic immune system. And then basically what happens is when you take all that energy and you focus it towards your mind, uh, you know, then your mind actually becomes very powerful, and it's able to produce hallucinations. You know, you hallucinate when you sleep, but then when you're awake, you hallucinate. You're creating things on the fly, and then ultimately everything is a hallucination. It's generated by the mind. So one of the things I really struggled with is, you know, I never really understood, but now I totally get it, you know, that everything's from the inside of your mind being projected outwardly. So, you know, it's not so much like your thoughts travel per se. They do, but you know, we have that entanglement theory where everything's entangled. So that's why you can look at a light from a long distance away and you can make it turn on or off, or even have control over the color of the sun and stuff, or even an object, is because everything has that entanglement aspect to it. But you know, ultimately it's on the inside of your head anyway, and without your senses and electrical impulses telling you that those things are real, they wouldn't exist. They would just cease to exist, and there wouldn't be anything without a sentient observer. So anyway, that's really how that works. And so you just make the best of it, and you know, you accept things. And even though we're living in a simulation, you know, that's really ultimately what it is. You try to enjoy life despite that fact. And you know, it's nice to know the truth. But I finally got to the point, you know, where there really isn't anything left beyond that. And you know, I can't generate miracles anymore, I don't think. It's because, you know, the burning desire isn't there anymore. And you know, it's like once the lesson is needed, you're given it. But once you have the lesson and you understand it, you know, from the fact that you've seen something unfold and it was given to you, and then now it's like you have you know, this clear, concise operating system, and you don't have all those things nagging at you night and day, begging to be answered. So once that happens, you know, then you lose your ability to do miracles. And you know, it's not like you know, I don't desire it. I do, but I can't really fathom per se, you know, what those things are. So anyway, that's all there is to that. And you just, you know, live a simple life and you be content. You know, boredom is a sign of suffering, and you know, monotonous boredom, and of course whatever else. But you know, being content with things, accepting things for what they are, you know, and then a way to add to my wealth is to take away from my desires instead of adding to my wealth. So anyway, that's all I really have to say. Over and out.